Right, well, it's amazing to be here this morning. If I look a little bit bedrazzled, it's because I did get caught in the rain. Why is it every time I come to London, it rains? In Crewe, when I left this morning about 7 o'clock, it was beautiful sunshine. But anyway, it's a lovely room full of very sunny people, so that's what matters today. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here today. I know we're going to have a fantastic time together. Just so I can get to know you a little bit this morning, can you just show me a hand if you already invest in HMOs? Okay, great. And show me a hand if you want to increase your HMO portfolio, or certainly increase your profits. And show me a hand if you've got no idea what I'm talking about and you've wandered into the wrong room. Richard, thank you. Okay, fantastic. So today what I want to talk to you about is HMOs, what next? Because we all know that the world of HMOs is constantly changing and evolving. I'm sure you will have noticed that even overnight there's been some fairly significant changes in the UK. And I would like to say, girl power! Because not only do you have two great female speakers this morning, but we also now have a new Chancellor of the Exchequer, the first female Chancellor. Whether you like her policies or not is a different matter, but I'm not going to get into that quite yet. So this is me, Wendy Whittaker-Large. I've been investing in HMOs for a long time. And in fact, as part of being here today, you're going to get a copy of one of my books for free. How's that for a nice free gift on a Friday morning? Yes, you can do a round of applause if you want to. I think we should also thank Omar for putting on a fantastic event. A round of applause for Omar. Because I think he's really drawn this together well, and it's a great day. Make the most of it. Make the most of who's here. Meet the people on your table. Don't be shy to speak to your neighbours. You know, I've met some amazing people at property events. Some of them have become investors. Some of them have become business partners. Some of them have become JV partners. Some of them have just become friends. And in this industry, you know, actually it's not very big. When you maybe first start, you feel like it's a huge industry and, you know, you're a small fish in a big pond. But you soon realise, actually, there are lots of people who come along, but not many people who take action. And if you're one of the action takers, you'll find soon, actually, you're a big fish in a fairly small pond. A few years ago, I was speaking at an event, and the host, who was a bit less diligent than Omar, put this on the slide. He called me Wendy Whittaker-Larger. Now, you know, if you're a little bit conscious about your weight, that is not the most flattering phrase to give a woman, to give a lady. And I thought to myself, well, you know what? I'm going to turn this adversity to my advantage. How many of you know you've sometimes got to turn adversity to your advantage? Say yes. Yeah. Great. And I thought, how can I use this to, you know, create something out of this, you know, this mistake that the host had made? And I said to myself, well, I am going to think big, grow larger. And that's exactly what HMOs do. Because you have to think a bit bigger when you're doing HMOs. As you've already heard from Zhuang, who made a brilliant talk. I mean, honestly, it's a case of follow that. She was fantastic, wasn't she? Really inspirational. No, thank you. Amazing. But to be successful in HMOs, it's not just about changing a normal 3-bed house into a 7 or 8-bed HMO. It's not just about physical size. It's about what goes on up here. You have to think differently. As Steve Jobs once said, think different. Because there's a mindset shift. You're not investing in single buy-to-lets. You're not just investing in one unit. You now have multiple units. And it's about learning and navigating that process. So you've got to think big to grow larger. That's it. Great. Yeah, I'm going to get a bit of audience interaction going. I hope that's okay. So what have I done? Well, since 2013, when I really kind of got going on HMOs, actually a lot has happened. And this is the other thing about HMOs, is they sort of take you in directions that you never quite expected. I've created a multi-million-pound property portfolio of lots of different types of property. I've done commercial conversions, I've got multi-unit blocks, I've got blocks of flats, I've done development, I've got a pub, which actually operates as a pub, to come up and have a drink sometime. I've got lots and lots of different property now. I've raised over £6 million in investor finance. Much of that has been paid back. I still have 2 JVs, and I've sold HMOs as well as developed them. I've bought them, developed them and sold them. I now manage and own over 220 units in the northwest of the UK, where I live. I have a lettings agency now who runs them for me, and we actively manage other people's properties as well. I've written 2 Amazon best-selling books on HMO. You've got one of them in front of you. I'm also keen on keeping fit and healthy because we only have one life, and I didn't want to grow any larger. So I thought, right, I better sort of do something about that. So I've run the London Marathon twice, the Great North Run, and done lots of other running races. Thank you. And that's been an amazing experience because, you know, when you are pounding it out on the streets or you're training for a race like that, you know, it makes you realise that running is very much like property investing. You've sometimes just got to put one foot in front of the next. Sometimes you're out there and it's tough. It's not glamorous, it's hard work, and you feel like the finishing line is miles away. And when I ran the London Marathon, I remember the first time, the big sign that said 13.2 miles. You've done 13.1 miles, I think it was. And I thought, oh, great! I'm halfway there! And I was already exhausted. But I did make it to the finishing line. And you know, sometimes when you're developing an HMO, it can feel a bit like that you are running a marathon. And this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So there's a real analogy there, there's a real similarity there. And then, of course, in recent times, I've had the honour of heading up the HMO Council Tax Reform Group, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. Just so I understand, have people heard about HMO and council tax? Yeah, many people have. OK, that's great. I'll fill you in a bit on that, but I'm not here specifically to talk about that. But that was an amazing time, I suppose. That was an amazing experience to head up that campaign. And I've now become much more I suppose, focused and determined to speak up for HMO owners, landlords, investors, tenants, because we really need to have a strong voice. We really need to make our voices heard, particularly in this changeable political environment. I think it's really important because we contribute a huge amount to the housing economy. The private rental sector would not be able to exist and survive without us in this room. Does everybody agree with me on that? Yes. And I think it's really important that we therefore have to tell the powers that be what we think, what we see, what we feel, what we hear, and challenge. The other thing I also have, and actually it was an ex-mentee who's here today, Pallavi, who came up and said, oh, Wendy, I really like your podcast. And I thought, oh, I didn't put it on the slide. So if you are interested in podcasts, I also have a podcast called the HMO Success Podcast. And it's on all the major platforms. So that's me. So a few photos of me. I like to travel. We had a great time last year. We went to Australia. I saw the World Cup, the Women's World Cup in Brisbane, which was incredible. This year, actually next Tuesday, I'm going to South America for 3 weeks. So all of this is possible, though, through having a lifestyle that has totally changed in the last 10 years for me, from being a working mum, 4 children, stressed, busy, to now living life on my own terms. Now, how did I do that? Well, I had to think big and grow. That's it. You're getting there. They're quite good, aren't they? Yeah. Well done, Omar. And then some photos really of me just getting some awards, which is absolutely lovely and very gratifying. But I have to always say, and I do say this, that those awards are down to you. They're not just down to me and what I did and what our group did. Darren Brewer should have a mention, Alan Burndy should have a mention, the rest of the panel, the rest of the reform group should have a mention. But actually, if you did anything, if you wrote to your MP, if you were engaged in the Facebook group, if you came along to one of our webinars, if you donated to the cause, you also changed the law. So it wasn't just me. But these are some of the lovely awards I've had as a result of what happened with council tax. So let's have a quick think about why HMOs. You're here today to learn about HMOs. Are you mad? Why HMOs? Just shout out some ideas. Why do you think HMOs are a good investing strategy? Why do you want to do more of them?
Maximum returns, cash flow.
Great. Returns, cash flow. Thank you.
It looks good on Instagram.
It does indeed. Nice photos. Yeah.
Good affordable housing.
Good affordable housing. Thank you. Love it.
Grow larger, a bit faster.
Yes. That's it. You can go faster. That's a very good point. Yes, demand. The need. Sorry?
Spread the risk of void.
Thank you. Spread the risk of voids. Perfect. Any other ideas? Cash flow. Leverage. Yes.
Recycling money.
Yep, recycling your money. Fantastic. What else? I'm sure there's lots of other reasons, aren't there? You wouldn't be here if there weren't a multitude of reasons. One of the reasons why I also love investing in HMOs is because it's much easier to raise investor finance because of the cash flow. It's easier to do a 50-50 if there's lots to go around. And often in JVs, where there isn't so much to go around, the JV doesn't work. So HMOs can be really powerful for that as well. So there's lots of good reasons to invest in HMOs. But I think we have to be aware that for us and for many people who don't have assets, of course there are problems. And not having assets is a reason why we personally might want to be doing this, as well as all those great other reasons. Well, we're dependent on our job income. If you don't have assets, you don't have any what I call residual income. It's not really passive, but residual income. You are going to be limited by how much you can earn. You're going to be time poor. Show me your hand if you ever felt time poor. Yeah, maybe you feel time poor right now. Maybe you had to take a day off to be here today. Maybe there are often times when you think, I just wish I had some more time in the week. I think the other thing about not having financial assets is it tends to put us into the category of not being educated. And I think financial education is critical because there are lots of areas in property which are really important to learn about. Taxation, for example. Tax can be a huge drain on your cash flow and on your profitability if you don't strategize for it, and if you don't understand how it works, and if you don't understand how to mitigate it, and you're not using mechanisms like a SAS, for example, which is a very, very powerful way of reducing your tax bill. There's lack of flexibility if you're in a job, and a lack of choice over lifestyle. And you're not self-sufficient. And I think for investing in HMOs, the benefit is it can answer all those questions very quickly. You only need a handful. 4 or 5 HMOs for most people would change their lives. You don't need a lot of property to do this, and you don't need a lot of them to change your lifestyle. And that's why I think they're so incredibly powerful. Now, as we think about 2024, and we think about some of those factors, those areas that affect HMOs, I'm sure that all the ones that I've put on the screen are ones that you can relate to. Are there others that I haven't thought of that you know are affecting HMOs right now? So we've got rental levels, employment, immigration, regulation, market supply and demand, interest rates.
NIMBYs?
NIMBYs, yes, planning.
There seems to be a lot of resistance around it from people.
Yes, that's a really good point. As you were saying about dealing with the local community when it comes to planning, that's going to be a really interesting one. Other factors that maybe you've encountered or things that you've thought about, is this going to affect me investing in an HMO?
I think the rent reform bill will have, what the real version is, because
Thank you,
there are lots of
Pallavi.
factors in it.
Yes, I think that's a really good point. So what Pallavi was saying is that, for example, the Renters Reform Bill, which was ditched just before the general election, and Labour are looking to do some form of that, and we'll find out very soon what their plans are. In fact, that is Keir Starmer saying, Wendy, we're having a meltdown here. So until the slides come back, actually on the next slide, funnily enough, which I prepared and sent to Omar yesterday, was a picture of all the main parties' logos. Because when I prepared the presentation, we thought that there was going to be a Labour government today, but nobody, of course, knew. And now we know there is a Labour government. So I think one of the things that we have to be very aware of as HMO investors is what the lie of the land is going to mean for us in terms of regulation moving forward. So it looks like Section 21 is going to be abolished. And in the Renters Reform Bill, what we saw was a lack of awareness and understanding of how an HMO operates. That initially, when the bill was first written, there was very little acknowledgement of the needs of some of the specific areas of the market, like student HMOs, and the fact that students will often come in for 9 months. So everything in that bill was written around the needs of the single buy-to-let market. And a lot of politicians, because they haven't got experience in the private rental sector, they don't value the private rental sector, they don't realise that actually that's only one form of accommodation. There's lots of other types of accommodation out there. Thank you. Well done. So let's quickly look at immigration. Nigel Farage wanted this to be a big election issue. But you can see how immigration has hugely risen since 2021. And partly this is due to the fact that after Brexit, we opened up our borders to the rest of the world. Prior to that, our agreement with the European Union was such that we would prioritise nationals from Europe. But now we have a lot more people coming from the rest of the world. Now, most of them can't get a mortgage. Most of them are coming here possibly on student visas or temporary work visas, and they're coming into the UK. Now, I'm not going to share my views on whether I think that's a good thing or a bad thing, but what we can do as investors is respond to it, because people need somewhere to live. You can't live in a cardboard box. Well, I suppose you could. I know some people sadly do live in cardboard boxes. But ideally, you want somewhere warm, dry, well maintained, a roof over your head. And what better place to come and live in a lovely HMO room provided by one of us? So that's immigration. Now, interestingly, some other statistics that I think are worth looking at, and I love to study the market. I think market economics and macroeconomics are really interesting, and I don't come from that background at all. But I think it's incredibly useful because as investors, we are not just investing for the short term. We're not necessarily investing to flip, although you might decide to do that with some of your developments. But if we see this as a marathon, not as a sprint, and if we're thinking to think big and grow, thank you, then we have to be always looking on the horizon. What's happening on the horizon? Now, this is some data from from RICS, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, and what's really interesting is looking at national sales stock levels. So this is stock levels in the sales market, and you can see how numbers we had a big dip in 2020 for obvious reasons, came up a bit and has kind of carried on sliding down. So the actual number of properties on the market has significantly dropped. This is average stocks per surveyor. Now, there haven't been a huge increase in RIC surveyors, which would also give that result, but actually that's average numbers per surveyor. That's really useful, because if you've looked around and thought, you know what, there just aren't any good properties to buy. I just want a simple, easy to buy, Rightmove. I just want to go onto Rightmove and find a 3-bed and convert it into a 6-bed HMO. What you might call a sort of vanilla kind of thing. Has anybody thought there just aren't those properties out there for sale? Has anybody seen that? Yeah. Well, this would back that up. It's true. People are not selling up. The cost of moving is much higher. The interest rate, of course, is causing people not to want to move from their current deal. They feel safe and secure staying where they are, and people are doing more extensions, loft conversions, changing their house rather than moving. But also, let's look at room rates. So if this is taken from Spare Room. Spare Room produce a quarterly index. Now, this is admittedly from the end of 2023, because they're always about a quarter behind. So apologies, it's a slightly out of date. But if you see here in the bottom right-hand corner there, over the last, from quarter 3 2022 to quarter 3 2023, so about 6 months ago, London has gone up by 16%, UK by 16%, and excluding London, 14%. We've heard these stories in the news, haven't we, about rents going up and about the cost of living increasing. And this is evidence of it here. And you can see the different areas and the different changes. All of these factors will affect what you do. How determined you are to take a building and turn it into great accommodation. To feel confident that this strategy works. And knowing these statistics, I think it's massively helpful. Because what we can see as we scan the horizon is that as rents go up in rooms, we know that rents are also going up in apartments, in houses, in other forms of accommodation. And because if you look at the percentages, if you were to translate that into a pound figure, you'd find that in some areas, those rents are just now unaffordable for an individual wanting to rent a unit of accommodation. All that is affordable now is an HMO room. So this, while it's not good necessarily for those individuals, it's harder for them, as investors, it should give us confidence that the market is very, very strong. So that was the slide I was referring to last night. So we know who's winning, who's won the general election now, and Labour have committed to do a lot of things in housing. One of them, of course, is reform the planning system, and this has been promised for parties immemorial. Have talked about reforming the planning system. Whether they actually do or whether they don't, we'll wait to see. I think one of the big problems that we also have in the current situation is Article 4. And Ryan, you were mentioning Article 4 earlier. You see, Article 4 was brought in, I think it was in an Oxfordshire council that first sort of triumphed this idea that if we were to control HMOs in a specific area by putting a planning restriction on it, then it would mean we couldn't have all this proliferation of HMOs. But you see, that flies in the face of good, sound economics, which is the economics of supply and demand and competition. Because if you don't have any competition, it's very, very easy to get kind of a bit laid back and to say, well, I don't need to maintain my HMO very much. I don't need to keep it to a high standard because there's no competition. Article 4's come in and guess what? I've got 3 HMOs in an Article 4 area. Lucky me. Well, it is lucky for you, but it's not necessarily lucky for the tenants. Because your HMO is slowly getting worse. There's no competition to make you think, oh, I better zhuzh it as my lettings manager calls it. You know, I better do it up a bit. I better maybe put some en suites in, or I maybe better improve it in some way, or maybe lower the rents. That would be amazing, wouldn't it? But competition is good for the marketplace. Competition is great because what it does is it drives up standards and it allows tenants to have choice. And one of the reasons we're in the situation we are with the PRS is because there isn't enough choice. Landlords have exited the market for many different reasons, and so there are fewer properties available. So prices have gone up, choice has gone down, and competition has gone down. So I would really like to see an end to Article 4. Now, that is not going to go down very well in a lot of local communities because they believe that means that they're going to have more HMOs. I believe it means they're going to have more better quality HMOs. And somehow we have got to solve the housing crisis. So how can we respond in 2024 to all these challenges, these unknowable factors, and other challenges in terms of, for example, energy prices, which kind of, you know, they've kind of abated for the time being, but might come back. So first of all, refurb light. There are some great HMOs on Instagram. It's true. And many of them, you know, get my mouth watering. Yeah, they look lovely. But there's a great need for HMOs across the spectrum. And there is no reason why you have to put beautiful singing and dancing en suites in all your HMO rooms. You could do a refurb light. Doesn't mean to say it'll be shoddy or poorly done. Meet all the health and safety standards, absolutely, because otherwise you won't get your licence. But you don't necessarily need to spend an arm and a leg on your refurb. What about tenants? How can you differentiate your service, your provision to your tenants? For example, we work with probably tenants who speak maybe 20 languages. We have huge amounts of international tenants. And so what we try and do is make sure that a lot of what we provide for them is in their own natural language, or certainly try and work with them if they don't understand the way that we have to do things in the UK. Also, what we found is because of some of the precarious nature of employment, that using guarantors has been incredibly effective for us. So we now don't take any tenant unless they can provide a guarantor. And I can see a few heads nodding across the room. Also, larger deposits. Now, that's one you have to judge carefully. In some areas that works, in some areas that isn't. That can put people off from applying. Offer, offer, offer. Deal, deal, deal. What do I mean by that? What I mean is don't give up. Okay, don't give up if you are not finding property, finding the right kind of property to develop. You've got to keep looking. Remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. You've got to keep putting one foot in front of the next, in front of the next, in front of the next. And I would say that having a system to do this is really critical, and I'll talk about systems in a minute. One of the things that I see with investors is they don't recognise their own strengths in a sale, in a transaction. You see, you don't have a chain. You've probably got your finances already sorted. You are already ready on paper. You'll be organised. You have all your paperwork ready. You're not buying for yourself. Now, that's a really important reason that you need to communicate with the estate agent or whoever's doing the transaction. Because 1 out of 3 deals falls apart. 1 out of 3 deals in England, they fall out of bed. So that means that that person who thought they'd sold their house suddenly wakes up one day to find out, oh, the sale's fallen through, what am I going to do? Whereas if you can show to the estate agent that you're actually a solid buyer, this is a massive feather in your cap and you should use it. And make your voice heard. You know, don't just roll over when it comes to legislation and regulation. Challenge a little bit. Because I really believe, like Margaret Mead once said, that when a group of people who are committed come together, 90, 100, yeah, between 90 and 100, something like that, isn't it? So imagine you've got a 6-bed HMO, and perhaps it was band B or C, which might be 140, 150, and suddenly you've got 6 Band A bills. So you've gone from paying £150 a month council tax to £600 a month council tax. Not good. That would wipe out a lot of your monthly profits, wouldn't it? That with energy bills, you know, you're going to find you've taken a bit of a hit there. So setting up the HMO Council Tax Reform Group, we decided to fight this as a very unjust measure. We decided that we had to take some action because I really believe in the HMO industry. I believe in this marketplace. I think it's incredibly powerful. I mean, look at everybody in the room. You know, the energy, the enthusiasm, the determination to do this, it's brilliant. I would love it if somebody from the government could come and see you all here today. And I think it's really powerful because I think we can be agents of change. I think we can make our voices heard, and I think we can do things that are good for the industry. So, as of December last year, as I know you will have heard about, the law changed. We managed to change the law. And it means that now any HMO, which is what's called a Section 254 HMO, which is generally a licensed HMO, will not have individual room banding on the rooms. It won't have council tax on the individual rooms. Now that's good for 2 reasons. One, you as the landlord, you can be certain that you're not going to suddenly have this horror of having multiple bills for those rooms. But number 2, it's also good for the tenants, because now they can be assured that they're paying their room rent and their bills are fully inclusive. They're not going to get any surprises. So this is a really important issue. We've still got a few backdated issues that we're dealing with, and that's kind of rolling on in the background, but we're trying to address those. And if you do come across anybody who has this problem, or you yourself have it, at the end I'll share with you my contact details. Please get in touch, because we do offer help and support and advice to people who've gone through this. Going back to HMOs though, in a wider strategy. So you'll know it's a bit more advanced than buy-to-let. There's more rules and regulations. But you can start small. You don't have to have a 7, 8, 10 bed HMO. You can start with a small HMO. One of the things that I would say from every person I've ever heard talk about HMOs is the importance of knowing your own area. Okay? Decide where you're going to invest and become an expert on that area. Understand the streets. Understand the amenities. Know where the bus stop is. Figure out how to get to the train station or the shops. Figure out where the best streets are. Figure out what kind of properties are in certain areas. Because the more that you do that, the faster you'll be at spotting deals. The quicker you will be able to jump on something when you see it. And also it means you can do some targeted advertising. And this is also a very powerful strategy if you're struggling to find deals, is to actually get out there and ask for them. Write to people. A letter through the letterbox. Hello, I'm looking for a property just like yours. Would you be interested in having a conversation? You might not want to go through an estate agent. I can give you a really good offer, but I need to know if you're interested. Here's my details. Please come back to me. Because you'll find there'll be lots of properties in your area where people are thinking about selling, but as we saw from those previous slides, they're resistant. There's reasons why they're not. And of course, nowadays, there's lots of options with HMOs. So asylum seekers, social housing, charity leases, lots and lots of different ways in which you can develop HMOs, not just professionals or students. Quick question, are you ready to invest? Ooh, that's a good one. Well, if you'd like to find out, scan the QR code. Feel free to get your phones out and scan that. I've got a very short self-evaluation. Just about 8 questions. You can fill that in, and then we just send you a very quick report with a bit of advice. So it's for whether you're starting off, you're scaling up, or you're systemizing your business. Fill out our self-evaluation, and that's going to just give you a little bit of thoughts about where you are now and where your next steps might be. while you're doing that, it won't take you too long. How many of you know the importance of a system? Show me your hand if you think systems are important in property. Yeah. And show me your hand if you absolutely hate systems and can't stand them. Yeah, a few of you as well, yeah. Well, do you know what? I'm one of the latter. I'm not really a very systematic person, but I realised when I started investing in HMOs that I had to have a system. Now, why is the system important? Any thoughts from you?
So you don't miss anything.
Brilliant. Yes, so you kind of got your own due diligence checklist. You don't miss anything.
You
What-
have more time.
Have more time. Perfect. Great one. Good reason. Yes, sir.
It allows for scaling up and outsourcing.
Perfect. Scaling up and outsourcing. Yeah.
Repeatable.
It's repeatable.
Consistency.
Consistent. Excellent. Anything else? Any other reasons why?
Saves you money.
Saves you money. Yes, fantastic. There's a guy called Michael Gerber who... Has anybody heard of Michael Gerber? Yeah, a few people. He's brilliant when it comes to systems. And this is a quote from him, and I love this quote. If your business depends on you, you don't own a business, you have a job. And it's the worst job in the world because you're working for a lunatic. And I don't know if you can relate to that, but when I had about 50 rooms, I'd created a portfolio of about 50 rooms, and I was doing everything. I was filling it, I was finishing it, I was funding it, I was running around trying to find the next one, and I was also trying to future-proof it. And it was crazy. And I thought, you know, unless I systemize my business, I'm not going to be able to grow. And remember, what we're here to do is to think big and grow. Yes, you've got it. Wonderful. So the only way to do that is through having a system. So my 5-step system, very simple, because I'm a very simple person. Find it, fund it, finish it, fill it, and future-proof it. Those are my 5 F's to HMOs. And it's very, very easy. But it means that I have a methodology so that I can outsource. I can pass on aspects of that system to my team or to other individuals, contractors and so on, that I can use in my business. And if you want to scale up and not just stay with a handful of HMOs, having a system is key. Let me give you an example. So this is an HMO in Crewe that we developed. So we worked with an investor on this one. This again was a 3-bed terrace, a very ordinary 3-bed terrace house in Crewe in Cheshire. Now I know that for you guys in London, you'll have to add a 0 onto the end. Because you probably don't know what that figure is, do you? You know, what was £102,000, Wendy? Yes, I know. However, look at the refurb. The refurb was nearly the same price as the purchase of the property. Whew, dear. We did a really big refurb, but it was a great refurb because we created a 6-bed HMO out of this one. Each room, and this is, again, because I'm simple, I need to have a simple way of identifying price. I like to break down the total cost of the project by the rentable unit that I've created. Does that make sense? So it's very easy. £200,000 divided by 6 is £33,000. But that's really helpful for me because it's like a metric. When I go into a building and I know roughly what I'll probably pay for it, assuming I'm going to buy it if I'm not going to do an option on it, I can more or less judge how much the refurb is going to be. So I've sort of got a figure in my own mind. And then I can look and see, is it 6-bed, is it 8-bed, is it 10-bed? How big is this going to be? And that then gives me an idea of those rentable units and what my return is going to be, because I know what my rents are in my area. It got revalued at $265,000. The new mortgage is $198,000. So there was a little tiny bit of money left in the deal, but you know, really negligible. So this was one of the rooms beforehand, and that's what it looks like now. The kitchens, this is an interesting one because when we bought it, the kitchen looked like that. And you can see there's a door there. Well, that's because there was an outbuilding attached to the back of the house, and no one had really thought about that outbuilding. In fact, when we saw the estate agent's plans, they didn't even mention it. So we thought the biggest this could be would be a 5-bed HMO, and I was a bit, But when I saw that there was a potential to knock through and create a 6th bedroom, this is really where the deal started to get a lot sweeter. And in fact, that's the back bedroom coming off the kitchen there, because this was the doorway, and there's a little alleyway at the back of the house. So this was, if you like, the old, it was like a sort of shed garage storage area, and obviously it's now an extra bedroom. And that's another photo at a different angle of that same room. So this is what we were shown by the estate agents. Again, this is another little tip. Estate agents don't always tell you everything that is on the title deed. It's they're looking at it as a family home. They will share information with you because they think you're buying for yourself or your family. They haven't got your mindset. They're not thinking big and growing, but you are. So what I discovered was that actually this was what the floor plan was like. We had this extra room. Now that is what I call a jewel in the crown, because it's the extra bit. It's the bit that nobody else has seen. It's the bit that only I have spotted because I've gone to do a viewing. It's the bit that only I can see the potential of because I've been educated. It's the bit that only I can understand because I know what the room rates are like. It's the bit that only I know about because I've bothered to do my homework. And that's the bit that you can find too. So there we are, the jewel in the crown. So, when we first developed it, this building was bringing in about £500 a month rent. Those rents have since risen because this was done just before COVID, so about 2019. We're now on about £650 per month per room. They've gone up by about £150. Utilities are about £110 a person per month. The new mortgage was about 5%. I always put in something for voids and maintenance and management. So net profit, the net profit on that then was £1,020. So it's more or less, 100% return on investment. Now though, with the rents being at £650, you can do the maths. I'm afraid I can't. So I only got a B at GCSE, so kind of, give me some slack. But you can see what a difference it makes, having property over the long run. Now, Charlotte is a lady who I worked with. I run a mentoring program, and this opened a whole world to her about HMOs. The idea that you can systemize, the idea that you can grow, the idea that you can think big and grow larger. And she took it on board. And within 2 weeks of joining the program, she'd raised £150,000 from an investor. And she now has a fantastic HMO, making her £1,500 a month. And in fact, she's gone on to do a JV with other people and now has a very good property portfolio. Mahatma Gandhi once said, "The future depends on what you do today." So your decision here today is critical. And despite everything else that's going on in the world in 2024, you can, like Zhuang, like me, like other people, use that information and be an opportunist and grab it for yourself. Or you can say, ooh, it's too difficult, it's too painful, it's too hard, it's too tough, I'm not going to do it. But I'd like to encourage you to think big and... Thank you very much. So I don't know, is there some time for...
Yeah, we've got 10 minutes.
Perfect.
take some questions from Wendy, if anyone would like to ask one.
What for you is the biggest factor of determining demand locally? How do you factually account for that?
That's a really good question. So we have a lot of good relationships with local recruitment agencies, the hospital, Bentley Motor Cars, for example, is in Crewe. So we have a lot of good relationships with lots of businesses who tend to bring in staff who tend to live in our HMOs. So that's one way. Obviously, spare room, you know, you want to be doing all of that kind of number crunching on spare room. And one of the tips I'd give you about spare room is when I first started, a lot of HMOs in Crewe were really kind of grungy. You know, they were divey. You know what I mean? You wouldn't want to put your dog in them. And what I realised was there was actually a demand for much better quality HMOs. Because what I saw on spare room was that when the potential tenant would put their profile up, you know, you've probably seen it, haven't you? Somebody puts their profile up and they say what they're looking for. And they'll put a budget. And I realised that the rooms in Crewe or Stoke, because we now invest in Crewe and Stoke-on-Trent, they were about maybe £400 a month, you know, average rooms. But I had tenants who were looking and they were offering £600 a month or maybe £550. And I was thinking there's a gap here because these people are prepared to pay more for a nice room, but nobody's providing it. So the key, I think, is to understand your market first and then provide what they need and what they want. And that's the best way to do it. So you need to get regular data. Spare room is really, really key for that. Also speak to local letting agents and estate agents. Sometimes I find they're a little bit behind the curve, but nevertheless it's still worth having those conversations because when they find out you're doing HMOs, they tend to sort of prick up their ears a little bit and have a bit more of an antennae and may well be very helpful to you in terms of what they're finding, you know, what requests they're getting. Does that help? Great, thank you.
What further legislation do you think might come in for HMOs? So is there anything you think on the horizon or potential?
So Labour are very much committed to tenant rights. Now, if we had a very good court system, if we had a better court system, I wouldn't be averse to enabling tenants to have more rights. But I think it has to be fair and level. And I think when landlords can't get rid of bad tenants, and it's a bit easier in HMOs, but it's still not as easy as it should be. When we can't get rid of bad tenants, I think that's a big problem. And that's why I think a lot of people have used serviced accommodation, because serviced accommodation offers a much quicker route to exit if the person hasn't paid. There's much lower legislative demands on the property. And of course, up until next year, tax-wise, it's been a more efficient strategy. But of course, there are downsides to SA as well. You can have tenants who leave faster, well, they're guests rather than tenants. You know, there's other issues with SA. So I think that we've got to be prepared that there's probably going to be a national database of landlords. I think we are going to see more strengthening of the HHSRS system, Housing Health and Safety Rating System, which is what's used for licensing. I think we may see licensing coming in for 4-bed HMOs. In fact, it might come in for HMOs full stop. Originally, in the 2004 Housing Act, HMOs that were large had to be licensed, and that was a certain configuration, generally on 3 stories or more. Then in 2018, was it 2017? Richard probably remember. Licensing came in for 5 beds, and that's what we're all working to now. It wouldn't surprise me if they bring in licensing for, you know, anybody, any property that counts as an HMO, so where 3 or more people are sharing who are unrelated. So I think that's it. I don't think they will get rid of Article 4. If anything, I think we'll see more Article 4 as well. I think we will see heavier regulation. And that's why we have to fight it. I think also taxation. We have to look at what's happening on the horizon with tax. And if there's one piece of advice I can say on Friday, the 5th of July 2024, is learn about tax. It is the biggest depletion of your wealth and your income that there is. And if you do nothing else today, even if you don't ever set foot in an HMO, buy an HMO, or anything to do with HMOs, please study taxation and how to mitigate it, because there are some perfectly legal ways to do it. And in my view, if you are an entrepreneur, an investor, you're bringing wealth to the country, you're bringing housing to the market, you are providing a service that nobody else is providing. You should be as profitable as you can be and make as much money as you can. Yes? Yes.